Okay, so now we're continuing on with section 1.4, and we're on the top of page 37. Before I go ahead and continue on with these examples and notes, I want to go to a problem that we kind of dealt with before and incorporate the imaginary unit. So before we talked about the square root of 80, and we were able to simplify that before, finding the greatest perfect square factor inside there. So I would have had square root of 16 times 5, square root of 16, square root of 5, look at 4 square root of 5. That was from the P chapter. But let's look at, what if I had the square root of negative 80, and I want to simplify that? The first thing you want to do is you want to break this up into the square root of 80 times negative 1, because that's the same thing as the square root of 80 times square root of negative 1, and there's that imaginary unit that we're talking about. So if you see this, from now on, you can think of that as the square root of 80, and then I. You can pull the I out immediately. And then once you do that, you treat this problem like this right here. So now I have the square root of 80I, which is the square root of 16 times the square root of 5I, square root of 16, square root of 5I. I get 4 square root of 5I. So I tell students that if you see a square root of a negative value, so if I have the square root of negative 75, or the square root of negative 100, or the square root of negative 15, the first thing I do immediately is just write square root of 75, I, pull the I on the outside. This would be square root of 100, I, square root of 15, I. Okay, and again, we know that we can pull the I out because once I do this right here and I separate them, well, the square root of negative 1 is I, and that I is no longer under the radical. Some students will write this as I square root 80, and that way you know for sure it's not under the radical. But when you write your test out or on your exam, if you write the square root of 80 and that I looks like it's under the denominator, that is wrong. Okay, so you want to make sure it's either outside the radical, completely out there, or you could do it out in front like that. Okay. Again, you're going to still simplify the square root of 80, but I want to talk about how to use that imaginary unit. Okay, so let me go ahead and erase that and give myself some more room here. So let's talk about operations when we're performing operations with square roots of negative numbers. We always want to begin by expressing all square roots in terms of the imaginary unit, or I. Okay. So if I have the square root of negative 25 times square root of negative 4, I want to go ahead and rewrite those in terms of the imaginary unit. So this would be the square root of 25I. This would be times the square root of 4I. Okay. Again, how did I get that? I would do the same thing as I did up there. The square root of negative 4 would be the square root of negative, or 4 times negative 1, which is equal to square root of 4 times negative 1, which is square root of 4I. So keep that in mind. I'm going to skip this step from now on just to save myself time. So again, if I see a negative square root, I immediately just pull up the I. Okay. Now this gives me square root of, or this gives me, let's clear this out here, this gives me 5I times 2I, gives me 10I squared, which gives me 10 times negative 1, which is negative 10. That's the correct way of doing this problem. You want to go ahead and express all square roots in terms of I if you have square root of negative numbers. Now the wrong way of doing this problem is to do this. Square root of negative 25 times the square root of negative 4, and then you do the square root of negative 25 times negative 4. You get the square root of 100, and you get 10. That would be wrong. Because right here, what you did here was you took the values under the radical and multiplied them together. But doing that, you made it a positive 100, and then you got 10 out there, and you lost your imaginary unit. So always, 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 if you see a square root and a negative value under there, like I have right here and here, you want to go ahead and express in terms of I. Basically, you're just going to pull the I out, and then go ahead and do your operation. Okay? Let's look at example form. We're going to see this as we start doing example form. So here I have the square root of negative 27 plus the square root of negative 48. Again, I want to add these two values together, but again, I want to look at each of these and I want to express each of them in terms of I because they both have a negative under the square root. Okay? Again, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to write this as the square root of 27I plus the square root of 48I. Okay? Again, how did I know that right away? Because again, I go back up to here and I would have pulled the I out like right there. Okay, so save myself time. Okay. So square root of 27 is the square root of 9 times 3. 9 is the largest perfect square factor in there, and the I is still there. That gives me square root of 9 square root of 3, which gives me 3 square root 3I. Square root of 48, it looks like the biggest perfect square factor in there is 16. So square root of 16 times 3, and then the I is on the outside. Square root of 16 square root 3I. That gives me 4 square root 3I. Okay, now I have like terms, like they both have the same radical, so I go ahead and combine the coefficients. So I have 7 square root 3I. Okay. Some students like to write this out as 7I square root 3, and they pull the I out here to make sure that I know and you know that the I is not under the radical, but this to me is very clear that the I is not under the radical. This would not be very clear to me. It looks like the I is under that radical, so I would mark this wrong. Okay? Let's do part B. Part B, I have negative 2 plus the square root of negative 3, and all that is squared. I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 3 and then the I on the outside, and that's squared. And think of this as this. Okay, so I'm going to FOIL. First times first, so negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Negative 2 times negative times the positive is going to be negative. 2 times this is just going to be 2 square root 3I. Here I have positive times negative is another negative. And this is going to be 2 times this, so it's going to be 2 square root 3 and then an I. And last times last. Well, positive times positive is positive. And I have square root of 3I squared. You can think of that as the square root of 3 times square root of 3 times I also. Okay, so now I have 4. I can go ahead and combine these two because they're like terms. So I now have minus 4 square root 3I. Notice how it's not I squared, I'm just combining like terms. And here I'm going to have plus 3I squared. You can also think of this as the square and the square root negate each other out, and then I also have to apply the square onto the I. This gives me 4 minus 4 square root 3I plus 3 times negative 1, which is 4 minus 4 square root 3I minus 3. That gives me 1 minus 4 square root 3I. Okay, or you could have 1 minus 4I square root 3. Okay, let's go to example C. Part C, I mean, in this example. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is the division problem, and there is no radical in the denominator, no odd denominator, you don't have to worry about conjugates or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite this and express all square roots of negative numbers within the I. So this gives me square root of 12, and then an I comes out here. Square root of 12 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times 3, which is 2 square root 3. I skipped a step there. Let me go ahead and put that back in there. If you can skip this step, that's great. It's square root of 4, square root of 3, which is 2 square root 3. Now I have negative 14 plus 2 square root 3I over 2. And let's go ahead and split this up because I want it in standard complex form. And you're going to notice I can reduce this fraction. This reduces to negative, it's going to be 1 and negative 7. So I get negative 7. And this reduces 1 and 1, so I just get plus the square root of 3i. Okay, again, you could write that as negative 7 plus I square root 3. Okay. Next one I want you to do on your own. This is a challenging one, so go ahead and try this one. Pause the video, and when the video starts up again, I'm actually going to walk you through it in case you didn't get it. Okay, so this is the on your own problem, and I'm going to go ahead and start this, and hopefully you try this on your own. I'm going to have to change this to the square root of 12i times the square root of 4i minus square root 2. And this is the same thing, square root 12i times 2i minus square root 2. And the square root of 12 is square root of 4 times square root of 3, which is 2 square root 3. This is 2 square root 3i times 2i minus square root 2. Now I'm going to distribute this. This gives me 4 square root 3i squared. To multiply that out, I did this. Oops. I took 2 times 2, which got 4, square root of 3, and then the I and I take I squared. That's where I got that from. And then here I have minus, and then this is going to be 2 square root 3, or actually square root 6. And then how did I get that? I took 2 square root 3i times square root 2, and I rearrange that. I get 2, and I can multiply these two together because they're both in the radicals. So I get square root 6, and then I. And this right here, same thing as negative 1. So I now have negative 4 square root 3 minus 2 square root 6i. Okay, so that's the correct answer. Okay. So on the next page, I have, on page 38, a bunch of problems to do on your own. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to go ahead and pause the video too. And when you replay the video or hit play, all the answers should be on there. If you can do all these problems, then you're good to go in this section. Okay? Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so I went ahead and put the answers up for the on your own problem. These are the type of problems that if you can do these, then you're good to go in this section. And so the first problem, I got 33 minus I. And one below that, I got 12 plus 84i. And below that, I got 21 minus 20i. And below that, I got negative 12 over 13 minus 18 over 13i. And all my work is shown below. Up on top, I got negative 3i. And below that, I got negative 5 over 11 minus square root 2 over 11i. And this one, a lot of students, when I give this problem in class, they would get this far and they just forgot to reduce. So, if you have any questions, let me know. All the answers are on there. I'm going to see if I can turn this around that way. You can see all the answers at once. And if you have any questions, let me know. This is the end of this section. So you're ready to go ahead and start your assignment or your homework, depending on if you're in my online class or in class. And I'll go ahead and stop the video.